One more story. You guys will bear with me here. I promise it's the last one. One afternoon, about 11 or 12 years ago, my dad, Sean, and I were at lacrosse practice at the Medway Middle School. I remember my dad was one of the coaches, and Sean would get moved up to my age group every year to make it easier on my parents, because he was better than most of the kids my age. That year was great because we got put on a team with all our friends. The Dumichel brothers, Davenport brothers, Marchioni brothers, Fanning, Ahern, Borgatti, just to name a few. Sean and I thought it was great. My dad, not so much. As we would goof off with my buddies any chance we got. And this night was particularly bad. Sean had discovered the art of yard sailing someone. For those of you who don't know, this is the act of smacking someone's stick out of their hand while they're leaning on it. And leaving them on the ground like they're at a yard sale. Naturally, I saw Sean doing it, and I thought it was the greatest thing ever. We had that effect on each other. We spent the rest of the night yard sailing anyone we could, and the rest of the team joined in as well. At the end of practice, we took off our pads and started towards my dad's truck. And before we could get in, my dad slammed the door of the truck bed and said, "You guys are walking home." He got in the car, started the engine, and drove away. Now, for those of you who know Medway and where our house is in relation to the middle school, you know that it's really not that far. But at our age, we thought we might as well have been walking a half marathon. And the worst part was most of the trip was on Main Street, the busiest road in town. We were mortified at the thought of anyone seeing us. So we sat in the parking lot for about 15 minutes, coming up with a plan to make it home undetected. We started our trek going behind the middle school and into the woods parallel with Holliston Street. I remember Sean scraping his leg on thorns and hearing him swear for one of the first times ever. We finally made it to Main Street. Our plan was to cross over to the Medway Plaza and walk home behind those stores. We watched for a break in the traffic, and we made our move. We thought we were in the clear until two cars gave us friendly beeps as they passed by. I still know who that was to this day. We made our way behind Ann's Market and Keystone Liquors, getting some really confused looks from the guys dropping off empties for recycling. We went around Mickey Cassidy's and finally made it to Pond Street, almost home. We were about to hop into one last stretch of woods when a blue minivan pulled up. "Boys, what are you doing?" It was Nancy McShirley, the mother of a student in Sean's class and one of my mom's tennis partners. There was an awkward pause, and Sean, always the honest one, said, "We were bad, so our dad made us walk." She laughed and said, "Well, come on in, I'll give you guys a ride." Sean and I looked at each other, and we shook our heads. We both knew that if Mrs. McShirley told my mom and told my dad that we didn't complete our punishment, the next one would be even worse. And even if she didn't tell, that was a small town, Dad would find out eventually. So Sean and I politely declined and trudged home. I'm not sure why I picked that story in particular, but I had a million others just like it. I'm not trying to keep everyone here all night. Sean was an unbelievable athlete, and he continued his lacrosse career in high school for Medway, playing with all the names I mentioned earlier, as well as into college for the Corsairs. To the 2017 UMass Dartmouth men's lacrosse team. Not to self-promote, but I think I should be in the conversation for your number one fan this year. I know all the moms are shaking their heads. But I made every game except for 3, and the ones I had to miss I watched on the live feed on my double screen at work. I even caught the last quarter of the Plymouth State game after not hearing of the time change until an hour before, and driving all the way to Plymouth when the game ended up being in Northampton. The bottom line is I was all in for Sean's senior year. I felt like a part of the team. I felt the heartbreak after the Southern Maine loss in overtime. And I felt the thrill of the senior day victory against Western Connecticut, which ended up being Sean's last game. And I felt the relief after watching you guys pull out the 8-7 win over Salem State while in Sean's hospital room on the last night we had with him. I like to think it would have been that close if maybe when number 16 was out there. I think the proudest I ever was of Sean was at the Babson game in Wellesley earlier in the year. It was just me there. I think my mom went to Katie's game in Wheaton, and my dad couldn't get out of work. But it must have been 30 degrees, and UMass was down 7-0 at the half. I went down to the field and had a conversation with Sean as he came over to the end of the bench to test his blood sugar, as he always did. I told him, dude, I can't feel my toes and you guys are getting crushed. So I think I might get out of here. He smiled at me, and he said, hold on, we're trying something different this half. Stick around for a little bit. I said, all right, and I took my seat in the bleachers on the side where the offense plays. I'll spare everyone the details of the in-game adjustments, but I swear to God, Sean scores 4 straight goals to bring UMass right back into the game. And they weren't just any goals, they were Sports Center top 10 goals. Offhand, down the alley, Canadian style after going through 4 guys. Those may not be familiar terms if you're not a lacrosse fan, but the point is he was determined, and he wasn't going to give up that easy. My dad always says the sign of a great player is how he plays when his team is down, and Sean proved him right that day. To this year's squad, to all the members of every team Sean was a part of during his 4 years here, and to the entire UMass Dartmouth community, I thank you for the memories you gave him, the stories he came home with every holiday break and every summer that would have me on the ground laughing, and for helping him become the man he was. Thank you. As many of you know, every summer since my family moved to Medway, Sean would go off to what I call diabetes camp. I remember being overcome with jealousy when we dropped him off, looking at the endless fields and basketball courts, and seeing kids sailing and canoeing on the gorgeous lake in the background. It still ended up being a good day because Katie and I would run around pretending to be campers, while Sean and my parents spent the day sitting through introductory meetings and setting up his bunk. I knew Sean made tons of friends over the years through the camp. I knew they would get together during the year for holidays and birthdays, etc. And I knew a few of them personally from visits to Medway and surprising Sean in a couple of the games. What I didn't know was the bond that this camp creates and the relationships formed year in and year out. What I didn't know was that when I reached out to 2 of those friends, Ryan Cotillo and Caroline Brennan, to tell them Sean was in the hospital, that 60 kids would arrive to visit him and support our family. I didn't know that campers would fly in from Ohio, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Maryland, North Carolina, and Louisiana at the drop of a hat once they heard the news. I now know that the connection and the love this group has for each other is something truly special, and something I won't even try to describe. I know now that they understand and relate to this tragedy on a whole other level. And I know now that I have 60 new friends that I can depend on being there for me to drop the hat. We're not a particularly religious family, if you couldn't already tell. Still, I can't help wondering if Sean were looking down on us right now, what he'd be thinking and feeling. And I know he'd be so upset with himself, thinking he had anything to do with the pain and the suffering we're going through. He was so hard on himself at times. He was the most self-aware person I've ever met, and so hard on himself at times. Too hard on himself. And I just want to tell him that it's okay, that we're going to be okay, that Katie, my mom, Dad, and I are going to be okay, and that he's going to be in our hearts and our minds, and that the memories we cherish aren't going anywhere. I want to tell him that I'll never forget pillow fighting in our room, and the pillow monster, and sneaking as far down the stairs as we could until we heard my dad's footsteps barreling towards us. I'll never forget the countless hours of catch and street hockey and frisbee and anything else you could throw or play with in the yard. I'll never forget the drives to and from hockey practice in high school and the drives to and from campus in college, talking about everything from girls and beer to the future and our life goals. I want to tell them that at the end of the day, after all the shock and mourning and grief has faded, that I'm just going to miss hanging out with my brother. I'm going to miss learning from each other and growing together, sharing new experiences and reminiscing on old ones. And lastly, I want to ask him how Saturday night was after the senior game, because it better have been a good one. I remember a family conversation on the dock in Medina, Spain a few years back, talking about when and if Katie, Sean, and I were going to have kids. I said I didn't think I wanted kids, not just for the obvious reasons that they're a pain in the ass. No, but that God forbid something tragic were to happen to one. How could you live on and move forward? My dad responded, so what, are you just gonna sit in your fucking room for the rest of your life? Needless to say, that stuck with me. Combined with a few other experiences helped me realize that you can't be afraid to live your life. Speaking mainly to my peers in the crowd, realize that you're going to face challenges whether you like it or not. And you can either let it sink you, or you can deal with it and move forward. I choose to move forward. My family chooses to move forward. I ask all of you to move forward, not just with this, but with any obstacle you face in your life. Of course, it's easier said than done, and that's where your family comes in, and your friends, and everyone who loves you and cares about you, and will support you through thick and thin. To my mother, the sweetest, most genuine and caring person I know. To my dad, the rock that holds his family together. And to my sister, my best friend in the entire world. I promise I will be there for you as we continue to get through this, and I know you'll be there for me. And to everyone in this room, know that my family will be there for you should you ever need it. And you've proven that you'll be there for us. Thank you so much.